Kayong mangamba dahil ang ating bakuna ay pinag-aralang mabuti ng ating mga eksperto. Ito ay garantisadong di kalidad, ligtas, at higit sa lahat, epektibo at mabubuhay ka.
Hindi mamili kayo. Magpabakuna kayo o ipakulong ko kayo sa silda. Pero pag hindi ayaw ninyo, ipa-aresto ko kayo. Magpabakuna ka. Otherwise, I will order all the barangay captains to have a tally of the people who refuse to be vaccinated.
Ayan po yung turok-turok ng bakuna na yan. Magresulta sa bakuna. Yung anak ko, hindi na makahinga. Nakailang beses na yan. Nakailang beses na. Yung una na imatay. Resulta sa vaccine na yan. Mga vaccine, nayupag ng vaccine na yan.
Huwag kayong mangamba dahil ang ating bakuna ay pinag-aralang mabuti ng ating mga eksperto. Ito ay garantisadong di kalidad, ligtas, at higit sa lahat, epektibo at mabubuhay ka.
We have to understand that these vaccines are only in their phase 3 trials. No? So we need to monitor for long-term effects of these vaccines.
We need to monitor for long-term effects of these vaccines.
Pero nanay, ito po, ano pong gagawin ninyo sa premyo na talaga na to?
Ay, naku po, malaking tulong po sa akin dahil may apo din akong nabulag. 20 years old na po siya.
Ano nangyari?
Umuwi po siya sa amin, ang sabi niya, Lola, dito muna ako dahil magpa-inject ako vaccine. Kasi kung hindi daw vaccinated sila, hindi siya makabalik ng trabaho. Unang vaccine, yung mata niya ang isa. Nung nag-second dose po siya, dalawa na po. Mula nagpa-vaccine, nabulag siya. 20
years old lang, bossing.
Totoo po sa
Kailangan ko nakadinig ng
injection lang?
Ni-report niyo ba sa
Kasi
health center yan? Ni-report niyo raw ba?
Hindi po.
Naku,
Hindi po.
Report niyo sa health
Kasi
center.
hindi naman inano ng mga magulang eh.
Dapat po, in-report niyo. Kasi wala naman siyang ibang ginawa, yun lang.
Ayun lang, nagpa-vaccine.
Nasawa ka na, Rodini.
Palo po ako, sir.
Paano ka? Kailan pa?
October 5 po.
Last year lang?
Ay, bago na.
Talaga? Ay, nangyari. Pasensya na nagpapatanong ako ay naiyak ka tuloy. Ano po nangyari?
Nag-vaccine po ng October 1. Tapos, namatay po ng October 5.
Ay,
Sabi niya, kay vaccine kayo. Kung ayaw niyo, sabi niya, makulong ka. Galing lang dito, sabi niya, yung COP namin. Tatlo, sabi niya, yung hindi nagpa-vaccine. Tapos dinala, sabi niya, sa kulungan. 11 yun, sir, nung hinarang po kami. Marami yung hinarang, sir. Yung vaccine card minister ko, hinold nung pulis. Meron sabi niya sa batas, kung first dose lang sabi niya, understood sabi niya na wala kang vaccinated, hindi ka vaccinated sabi niya. Hindi man ako sabi ko pwede ma-vaccine sabi ko kasi may sakit ako sabi ko sa heart, congenital heart disease.
Hindi ka nila binakuna, hindi ka nila pinili.
Ay, gina-insist rin nila. Pati si Mr. ko gina-insist rin na magpapakuna na daw ako. Tapos hindi kami makaalis-alis kasi kinuha yung vaccination card niya. Hinold ng mga pulis.
Tuloy tayo mga kabikada, medyo na tayo rito, na-alarma tayo dito sa sa isang information.
And we were happy to share this copy with the committee. Sorry, there's an echo yet. This video seeks to encapsulate the extent of the human rights violations that were committed during the COVID-19 pandemic. This is a direct result of the violation of Republic Act 11525, which said that vaccination was never intended to be mandatory. However, the IATF in November 2021 issued IATF Resolution 148B, which expressly violates the mandate of Congress. It also misrepresents the vaccines by saying that they are safe and effective, when RA 11525 expressly recognizes that they have not undergone phase 3 and phase 4 clinical trials, and therefore therefore they are experimental. Also, Mr. Chairman, we wish to point out that the COVID Indemnity Fund provided for under Section 8 of RA 11525 is not widespread, it's not known by many people. We have thousands of reports from all over the country, Mr. Chair, and we can forward copies to your committee. 1,894 people reported to us that they were forced to get the vaccines and they otherwise would not have gotten the vaccines. 2,410 people said that they were discriminated against for being either partially vaccinated or unvaccinated. We have 495 reports from all over the country reporting human rights violations. These copies were provided to the Commission on Human Rights. However, the Commission on Human Rights never acted. To the best of our knowledge, they never acted on these complaints, Your Honor. And we wish to make it of record that the constitutionality of IATF Resolution 148B was challenged before the Supreme Court. Unfortunately, it was dismissed by the court on a technicality, saying that it had no jurisdiction, that it should have been heard by the RTC. However, the RTC of Iligan City, a similar case was filed with the RTC. The RTC said it should be the Supreme Court that will decide. So, Mr. Chair and members of this honorable committee, similar to what we witnessed this morning, it seems that no one is willing to take responsibility for this issue. The judiciary has failed us. The prosecutors who were approached to file cases of grave coercion for all of these people who were affected by the vaccines received no sympathy from the DOJ. There are even some public attorneys, Your Honor, public defenders from the PAO office who refused to help unvaccinated people despite the clear directive of their head of agency, PAO Chief Persita Acosta, to assist the unvaccinated. Mr. Chairman, there is so much to say, but we can furnish a copy, Your Honor. We can furnish a copy of the petition that was filed with the Supreme Court. All our arguments, all our evidence is here, complete with the annexes.
The petition was dismissed by the Supreme Court, correct?
Yes, Your Honor. And the anomalous aspect of this was the press release was issued well ahead of the release of the decision. The decision was announced in July, a week before the President lifted the state of public health emergency, but the petitioners only received the actual decision in November.
So the release was late.
Yes, it was released late.
But the dismissal was on the ground that you should follow the hierarchy of the courts, correct?
Yes, yes, Your Honor. And also, we wish to make it of record that the Supreme Court did not sign this petition, did not sign the decision. Normally, decisions issued by the Supreme Court and bank are certified by the Chief Justice. The voting of the justices is announced, and I have a sample decision, Your Honor, where that procedure was indeed followed. In this particular case, it was only the clerk of court that issued the decision, Your Honor. And this is in clear violation of the Constitution, which says that every decision that is rendered by the Supreme Court, either in bank or in decision, must carry with it a certification from the Chief Justice attesting to the voting and the fact that the votes were arrived at in consultation with the court.
Are you counsel on record of that petition?
I am not, Your Honor.
You're not? Did you ask your counsel on record if they received the official decision of the Supreme Court?
Yes, Your Honor, we have a copy of that here and we can furnish it to the
And it does not contain the signatures of the justices who
Yes,
approved
Your
it?
Honor, yes.
Nor the certification from the Chief Justice?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, now did you follow the ruling of the Supreme Court to follow the hierarchy of the courts?
Your Honor, what happened was, during this time, after the resolution was issued, so IATF Resolution 148B was issued, many concerned citizens resorted to legal action in different parts of the country, and there was a concerned citizen who filed a case in Iligan City contesting the constitutionality of the Iligan City Ordinance, which was enforcing 148B. And the judge in that particular case, Your Honor, said that this issue involves a purely legal question and therefore should be decided by the Supreme Court. And so she dismissed it on the ground of lack of jurisdiction. And so it is very ironic that the Supreme Court stated that this case involves factual issues and therefore the case should have been filed with the RTC.
If I may, Mr. Chair, Co-Chair, is this doctrine of hierarchy of courts always being invoked by the Supreme Court in every decision?
Not always, Your Honor. I was discussing this case with a colleague of mine at the UP College of Law. He teaches legal history and constitutional law. And he said that he was very disturbed by this decision because this is one of the rare instances when the Supreme Court invoked the hierarchy of courts. Because as far as we practitioners know, the Supreme Court can invoke certain doctrines and disregard them. depending on the situation. And this is one of those cases where the doctrine of hierarchy of courts was invoked. It's a very rare.
So since that this issue had been dismissed by the highest court, what is your plan to do with all this? Did you nag-file po ba kayo ng motion for reconsideration?
Your Honors, we did not, because the cases of this nature are very highly political. We looked at the timing of the decision. The decision was released a week before the President lifted the state of calamity and the state of public health emergency. And so, kumbaga, it lost all sense of urgency. Second was, the press release was issued in July, but we only received the decision, or I'm sorry, the Council of Record received the decision in November. And so, the question was raised, when is the right time to file the motion for reconsideration? Is it from the time the decision was made public? And the petitioners were among the last to know. The public found out about the decision ahead of the petitioners, Your Honor.
Oh.
So, yes, Your Honor, because it was released publicly before the full text was received.
So there was already a prior release of the decision?
The announcement. It was an announcement.
It was announced.
It was an announcement.
And then you
There
have
were news
received the
reports.
copy of the decision after the announcement.
The legal team only received it 4 months after.
Congressman, Chairman Chairman Paduano, please.
Just to clarify, just correct me if I'm wrong, but the decision to embark was July 11, 2023. Officially.
Yes, officially, Your Honor.
But
But the decision was received November 23, 2023.
so 4 months after.
Yeah, 4 months after. And is it always like the decision of, when I was reading the decision of the Supreme Court, clerk of court lang dito, did the majority or the ponente, the embank to, di ba? They have,
Yes, it is a notice from the
signature ng mga ano?
that
What
is
the
also
signature sila lahat?
that is also our question, Your Honor. We find this highly
Is it always the
anomalous.
practice of the highest court to issue a decision? Oo nga eh. Yeah, I know. Congressman Akop is correct that, well, actually, I'm not questioning, but I'm just wondering why. Pero anyway, let's not talk about this anymore, no? Let's dwell on the abuse that was committed by the different resolution that was issued by the IATF. Unfortunately nga, wala dito yung IATF, and we cannot question, I think the representative is, are you capable to answer all the questions? You're not.
I leave that to the head of the offices, like
Yeah, and that's the reason why we'll be inviting over the chair.
That is why I subscribe to the opinion of Congressman Akop, Mr. Chair, that whenever we invite department heads, then they must be here. Or otherwise, if they're going to send a representative, they must make sure that the representative is authorized to answer for and in behalf of the agency they invited, and will bind the agency that is invited, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Congressman Akop.
Madam, you said that you did not file a motion for reconsideration, and you just accepted the decision of the Supreme Court.
Because the Supreme Court is the highest law in the land,
I agree.
the legal team had to read the situation and to decide that it was in the best interest to not raise the issue. However, we wish to flag that if the WHO pandemic treaty is passed, if the WHO amendments to the IHR are passed, if SB 1869 is passed, implementing effectively the WHO pandemic treaty and the IHR amendments, then we will have exactly the same problem. The dismissal of the Supreme Court was on a point of technicality. It did not decide the issues. So meaning, if mandatory vaccination is now going to be imposed in the future, by way of a treaty obligation, another case will have to be filed because this has not been settled.
I agree, Madam. That is precisely the reason why we are bombarding DOH questions on the amendments. Why? Because personally, I think it would infringe on our sovereignty. That's why I've been asking questions about this also. But I was surprised that you did not avail of the remedy of filing a motion for reconsideration.
Your Honor, it was very expensive actually to file this case, to find legal counsel of this caliber. This counsel was led by an eminent constitutional law expert. I understand his fees were not cheap, and so we had to rely on our prudence.
I know that. I've been there. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman Akop. Now, is one of the guests here invited about the hot lot of Johnson & Johnson? You are, please identify yourself.
I am Sally Clark, and I am working with Lunas Filipinas, and I have a presentation with regards to pharmacovigilance and hot lots in the Philippines.
Is it a video presentation?
No, it's a PowerPoint presentation.
Okay, I'll give you 5 minutes to make your presentation.
I'm going to have to jump through. I have a full copy of presentation here, which I can provide you with a copy as well.
Please do provide us with a copy.
So in effect, I'm just going to explain what I did because the presentation is relatively long. So what I have done is I have been monitoring the pharmacovigilance situation in the Philippines and also the vaccine rollouts in the Philippines. Next slide, please. Okay, as you know, we had very high levels of excess deaths in 2021. You can see we had a peak of around 2.5 times normal deaths in September of 2021. Next slide, please. We need to skip quickly. So pharmacovigilance is monitoring what happens with a drug, and this is particularly important with an emergency use product. Next slide, please. Okay, were there any hot lots in the Philippines? Next slide. Okay, the Philippines FDA was tasked with monitoring the outcomes of the COVID-19 vaccine and determining if there were any adverse outcomes. They provided a link for people to file reports of adverse reactions, and they also provided weekly and later monthly and finally quarterly reports. The last report was submitted on the 31st of December 2023. Next slide, please. Okay, the Department of Health, this is early December 2021, said that there had been no deaths directly related to COVID-19 vaccination. This is despite their having already received reports of thousands of adverse reactions and more than 1,000 deaths in their own pharmacovigilance system. Next slide, please. Okay, in January of 2023, I filed a Freedom of Information request to the FDA and asked if they had any information about any hot lots of COVID-19 vaccines in the Philippines. They replied that they were aware that there have been vaccine hot lots overseas, but that none of these were provided to the Philippines, and this is not a concern. I have full information which I'll provide a copy. Next slide, please. Okay, this is the pharmacovigilance report. This is the last report from December 31. And what we can see is that different batches of vaccines contributed different percentages to the overall vaccination efforts. Now, if these vaccines had all been equally safe, we should have had equal amounts of reports of adverse reactions and equal amounts of reports of deaths compared to the dosing of the vaccines. And what I've done, I put an arrow on Janssen. Janssen vaccine contributed only 4.2% of overall vaccines in the Philippines. However, it contributed 11% of the serious adverse reactions. And this is the highest adverse reactions of any vaccine deployed in the Philippines. And at that time, we had already had, 31st of December, there had been reports of 2,864 deaths to the Philippines FDA. The Philippines FDA up until this time still maintains that the benefits outweigh the risk in prevention of serious illness of COVID. Next slide, please. Okay. Of course, we have limitations with pharmacovigilance. One of the major limitations is that most people do not know that the system exists. And further, many people, even if they know it exists, do not use it because they do not have access to computer or resources to use it. So we know that we have a massive underreporting. So the injuries and the reports that we're seeing are literally the tip of the iceberg. Next slide, please. Okay, we also note that the Philippines FDA has a limited pharmacovigilance budget. From 2020 to 2022, its budget was 40 million pesos. Next slide, please. Okay, the Philippines FDA is one reporting system. However, the Philippines FDA, when they receive reports of serious adverse reactions, they reported these to the vaccine manufacturers. And the vaccine manufacturers, if they are based in the US, are mandated to report outcomes to the US VAERS system. So therefore, we have Filipino reports of adverse reaction in VAERS. Next slide, please. Okay, the VAERS database gives us a list of international adverse reactions, foreign adverse reactions, and Filipino adverse reactions. In the VAERS system, we have 7,000, just nearly 8,000 adverse reactions for Filipinos, and we have over 1,000 deaths reported. Next slide, please. Okay, so 7,795 reports, 1,158 deaths reported to the FDA. This system is publicly available. You can access and read every single report. I have read every report of death. Of the 1,158 reports of deaths, I have read them over the last 2 weeks. So I'm very familiar with these. So you can see the adverse reaction. Next slide, please. Okay, so from Pfizer, we have 5,000 reports of adverse reactions, and there were 531 deaths. We can also see the deaths reported by batch number. So Pfizer had a hot lot. The most deaths for Pfizer came from batch number FD5996. Next slide, please. The next slide is Moderna. Moderna had 1,034 reports, and they were about 11% of vaccine doses in the Philippines, and their hottest lot is batch number 939900, which